Okay, well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Becoming Us. This is a program brought to you by BetterHelp, which is a provider of virtual therapy sessions. And I'm Bambi Francisco Roizen. With me is Alyssa Morrison. She is the BetterHelp therapist. She's going to be facilitating our discussion on relationships for the month of August. So welcome wherever you are. You all look like you're in your living rooms. Maybe some of you are in a conference room or maybe in a car or park. But welcome anyway for at least taking the time to be with us. So this program is called Becoming Us, and becoming is a gerund. It is derived from the word become. And when I started off my career as a journalist more than 2 decades ago, we were encouraged to use gerunds all the time. So I could never say, oh, the stock market fell today. I had to say the stock market crashing to new lows, even though the stock market had already closed and wasn't crashing at that moment. I couldn't say policymakers passed a bill. I had to say policymakers slashing benefits or policymakers ramping up taxes. So there was no shortage of hyperbole, as many of you know, in the news business. And being a veteran journalist, take it from me, hyperbole has reached new heights. And unfortunately, that means professional journalism has reached new lows. And along with social media, this information that we're receiving and exchanging with one another, I think that's creating a lot of tension with our relationships. And for me, on a personal level, I've had a hard time creating those social interactions. My husband and I are we love to entertain, and we can't have social gatherings anymore with friends or families or neighbors. And also we're moving. So we're moving from one house to another, and that transition period is a bit unsettling. But I think we're all going through a transition period given this unprecedented lockdown. And some of us may like it, but some of us may not like it. And some of us may just be tired of it. And so when I think of this transition period, I think of that movie, Lord of the Rings, or the book, and that conversation between Frodo and Gandalf, where Frodo, in a very innocent voice, says, I wish it need not happen in my time. And then Gandalf says in a very low and assuring voice, so do I, and so do all who live to see such times. But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time given to us. So that's the purpose of Becoming Us. What are we doing with the time given to us amidst this crazy change in our life? What are we doing to change ourselves? And how are those changes in ourselves, how are they affecting our relationships? Whew, I was worried there I wasn't sharing the right screen. But you saw that last image was from an essay I wrote back in April, in this new normal, who do we become? But importantly, in this new normal, who do we become in relationship to one another? And I want to submit that during this time, this restive time, that before we engage with one another, we should start with a posture of forgiveness and grace. And I want to quote Maya Angelou, who said this about Nelson Mandela, who is a tour de force of moral courage and forgiveness. And she basically said, when you're not forgiving someone, you're kind of angry at them, and you're basically dragging them around with you. So she said, quote, you forgive a person's or systems, you forgive them, and then you don't have to drag them around with you every day and every night. It's a gift to give ourselves. And so forgiveness is a gift we give ourselves, but it also has bonus points, because out of forgiveness, we can have gratitude. So I don't know any unhappy person who isn't forgiving and grateful. So with that, I want to say that I am grateful for BetterHelp, because guess what, guys? We wouldn't be able to have this session without BetterHelp. So BetterHelp has thousands of therapists across the country. Alyssa is one of them. And you have to answer about 36 questions, because they really want to get to know you and match you with the appropriate therapist. And it's super convenient. You can be at home. You can have asynchronous chats with them, or you can have video chats with them. And you can have group hour sessions like this as well. And Alyssa leads quite a bit of them. So thank you, BetterHelp. So with that, I'm going to have Alyssa share an overview about sort of relationships from a clinical perspective, but then we are going to open this up. And this is a group discussion. We really want people to share, ask Alyssa questions, ask one another questions, share your stories, or just listen, maybe even comment on what other people are going through. But this is a way for us to, particularly, this has been really great for me to be able to hear your stories. It really is helpful. So with that, I am going to hand this over to Alyssa, and she is going to kick this off. Alyssa.
Thank you so much, Bambi. Thank you all so much for coming. This is really exciting. I love talking about relationships, which is good given my field. But my name is Alyssa Morrison. I'm one of the licensed clinical social workers with BetterHelp. And so what we'll do today is, like Bambi mentioned, we'll talk about relationships. I've prepared only a few slides in my deck and trying to touch on a lot of different types of relationships. But certainly this is just kind of a springing off topic. So if you feel like I'm only scratching the surface, please feel free to share. I am going to go ahead and start sharing this. So if I miss something, if somebody's trying to chat, please feel free to even just unmute yourself and talk. That is not going to throw me at all. And in fact, I would rather you do that than feel like you can't speak. So here we go. Okay, so, all right, so, not letting me, there we go. Okay, we're gonna start with dialectical behavioral therapy's Wise Mind. And so what this is it is a theoretical framework that we use in counseling. And if you were to look it up, you would find all kinds of great, like, peer-reviewed, evidence-based research, which is one of the reasons that we really like to use it. But I find that it is very applicable even if we are not coming to a therapist in a mental health crisis, even if we are not facing really intense symptoms, although dialectical behavioral therapy is very successful for many people with those symptoms. But something like Wise Mind, which I'll describe in one moment, really shows us that this can be a really daily practice. And when times are much more chaotic, it's a great tool to reach for. So the reason that if you were to do a Google search right now of Wise Mind, you'll see lots of Venn diagrams just like this. I'm particularly fond of it because I like that it shows the emotional mind and reasonable mind on the same level. Often when we consider maybe what we reach for. And we do tend to gravitate more towards emotional mind or reasonable mind more often, but certainly all of us experience and live in both depending on the situation. But it can be tempting to think that one is better than the other. And that is not the case. As you'll see, we really need both to get to that wise mind. So what are the minds? So emotional mind is when those emotions, they can be positive or negative. Certainly, sometimes when we consider if we're an emotional mind, we think of being maybe impulsive or reactive, but you're certainly an emotional mind if you are writing your wedding vows, if you're making a toast, that would be emotional mind too. Reasonable mind is when we are focused more on objective facts and that's influencing our actions. And to be honest, one of the things that I hear a lot in my groups, especially on BetterHelp, is that this seems preferable because it just seems like this is like a rational way to act, and people won't like get into trouble in relationships if they stay in reasonable mind. And certainly we want like our pilots, we want our surgeons in reasonable mind, we want them very much to be following the order of execution for what they're doing. But the problem with relationships, when we stay in either of these minds primarily, we're not really in touch with all of our needs. We're not necessarily taking in all the outside information or the contributing factors to maybe this conflict we're having. We're not necessarily looking at our own needs if we're in reasonable mind. Maybe, rationally, it makes sense that like if it's a two-parent household, that one parent is going to assume all childcare during the day and one parent's going to work. But if we don't look towards that emotional mind of, am I feeling burned out? Am I starting to feel resentful? Do I feel frustrated? All of those things, then that reasonable mind is no longer going to work for us. So that's where wise mind comes in. And it's where we really balance the two. So this is, again, like an overview. And one of the things that I would love is as we talk more, I might point out kind of which minds I'm hearing. I think this is something that we could spend a lot of time on, but as we talk about different situations and we label kind of which mind is which, and we can even talk about kind of how to access the other one with real-time examples, I think that will be more helpful. But certainly if anyone has any questions, let me know. Okay, so Dr. John Gottman is one of the leading, if not the leading couples therapists of our current time. And he talks about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And typically when he's talking about this, he's talking about romantic relationships. However, I think this is absolutely applicable to work partners, roommates. I think this is something with a lot of universality. So the 4 are criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. And as we talk about these, I really want to challenge you to kind of consider which one might be a place that you go under extreme stress, because none of us, unfortunately, completely avoid these. So what we can do is, as we try to adopt almost a non-judgmental stance of noticing what's happening, noticing our patterns, that's where we can really affect real change. So the first one, criticism, is fairly self-evident. It's, when we're really critiquing the other person, it's not offering constructive criticism, right? This is the really negative, belittling remarks. And so one of the ways that we can combat that is through that gentle startup, is what Dr. Gottman calls it, where sometimes people talk about a compliment sandwich, where it's something that's going right, something that could use some work, and then something that's going right. That's a technique. It's certainly not the only one. But when we also use those I statements, I know it's almost a little cliche at this point for a therapist to say it, but it's one of those cliches for a good reason. It definitely puts people a lot more at ease when you're talking about your experience rather than your experience of them necessarily. And it just comes across with a lot less judgment. The second one, contempt, is absolutely when it starts to almost border, if not become abusive, where we are maybe being like really, and when I say abusive, certainly physical, emotional abuse could become a part of that, but I'm really talking about like that abusive language in the moment. So if we are really speaking like with like some hatred or just some disgust, that's absolutely going to be picked up by the other person. And so the way that we can combat that is building a culture of appreciation. So yes, we are allowed to see things that are not working well for us in various relationships, but then we also want to counter it with really acknowledging what is working. Defensiveness, I think, is pretty obvious. For that, we really want to take responsibility. One thing about defensiveness is it regularly arises as a reaction to another person's criticism. So that can be really helpful is if we have the type of relationship where we can really go over like these 4 horsemen with the other person, potentially that's an opportunity when we're reflecting back to say, oh, you know, I noticed I became really defensive in that moment. I was having a very strong reaction to this piece of criticism. And if the other person is on board with this, then you're kind of sharing that vocabulary. Stonewalling is when somebody completely shuts down, where maybe there's a silent treatment, maybe they leave the room, but it's when that conversation doesn't really continue. And that is often arises out of a reaction to contempt. So for that, we what Dr. Gottman calls, what he suggests for that is physiological self-soothing. So really honoring if you are someone who does have a tendency to stonewall, honoring that you do need a break and that's okay, and that everything doesn't have to or can be solved in the moment. But it is nice if there is a time set when at least there'll be a check-in of, are we ready to have this conversation? Because people who really do want to solve this in the moment tend to feel much more respected in that. Okay, so then calm, let me just move this really quick. So calm parenting in chaos. Bambi has a presentation coming up next month. There's going to be the groups on parenting, so I'm going to just touch briefly on this, but it's obviously a major relationship and a relationship that's getting a lot more one-on-one, two-on-one, whatever the ratio is, FaceTime. And so one of the things that I have seen with my clients and I have seen with even like personally, like friends and family, is that there is a lot of like mirroring between parent or caregiver and child. And so as the adults' emotions rise and as their frustration grows, the children's behavior might also start to become what we might label as more problematic. So if we can really assess like what's going on for them, like what are their fears, and not necessarily what do we think their fears are, but potentially really being able to have that conversation depending on how old or developmental appropriateness of like, what are their concerns, especially as like school is starting and various like methods and manners, like what are their concerns? Because if we don't know exactly what they're thinking, we might not be like meeting that need. Another thing is maintaining expectations and continuing routines when possible. I know it can be very tempting to kind of let kids off the hook and have this like sense of, you know what, like I don't want to be mean, or I don't really want to ride them. And like that, I think that makes a lot of sense, right? Like often we have to assess, like, do I even have the capacity to be consistent? And if we don't, I think that's fine to take a break. But one of my a major part of my career was spent working in pediatric oncology. And that was one of the things that we would see a lot of benefit for kids, that even when they were facing really scary, life-threatening situations, if there were appropriate expectations and reasonable routines, it really gave them like this locus of control and the sense of normalcy. And so that's certainly a very specific extreme example, but I think it shows how important it is. And then briefly, just providing that consistent and positive discipline when necessary, and prioritizing grounding and decompressing activities. So if you are finding that, there's a regular time of the day that a child is really starting to become overstimulated and potentially demonstrating those frustrating behaviors, if it's something that we can kind of catch it before and offer a solution of decompressing, of coping before we get to that eruption, that is really helpful for them and really helpful for us as parents. Okay, there we go. And then the last bit is ways to promote that deeper connection. I think that this is something that many of you might see times that you need to do this with business partners, with the people that work with you or for you. But again, this is something that we could apply to people outside of our home and sometimes even people inside our home. And it's setting those discussions and check-ins as a recurring priority. And certainly this has some task orientation to it, where this helps keep us on track for goals and deadlines and any kind of financial piece of it. However, it also helps us feel connected to the other person. So if most of our communication right now is by email, that's okay, but maybe it would be helpful if we really set this reminder of, not everybody loves a video chat, but we really need to prioritize this so we have some of that normalcy that we would have if we were still in office together or meeting for lunch. Reaching out to that support network and considering where it can be expanded. So is this a time where maybe there is an opportunity to reconnect with an old coworker, an old mentor, or potentially, kind of a friend of a friend, reaching out to them. I think there are a lot of people that are having I think most of us are having a lot of fatigue with the pandemic, but that's really opening us up to being open to meeting more people and in creative ways. And there's not necessarily the same pressure of, okay, does this person even want to meet with me socially? Because most people are pretty excited for a change of pace. Being aware of cognitive distortions, which are those negative thought patterns. There are many that we could talk about, but some really common ones are all or nothing thinking, when it's something's either completely this or completely that. If we are engaging in some catastrophic thinking, where we feel everything is going to be completely terrible forever, that's certainly one that I've been hearing. What we can do for that is consider some of those rational counter statements where we can reframe those thoughts. So something like when we point out how that all or nothing thinking isn't a fact, and we look for those exceptions of the rule, or we look for ways that we really do see some hope in one day things getting back to a place where we're more comfortable. And then we mentioned it a little bit before, but fostering those creative methods to meet and stay in touch with people. Again, I know that many of us would rather have a face-to-face discussion with people, but really allowing it to be that there's nothing about the situation that has ever seemed normal to us. So it's okay if it's not quite as good as our ideal, as long as we're still connecting with people. That's going to keep us in a much healthier, safer environment. And when I say safer, emotionally and mental health. So those are the slides I have prepared, but certainly excited to talk about anything that is helpful for you guys. Do you, any thoughts, any ideas of like maybe something I didn't go over that you have questions about?
Well, this is definitely open for anyone who wants to share, but I'll chime in. So when I saw that that slide about the breakdown in relationships, and you talked about the four horsemen: criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling, what I see in terms of breakdown in relationships now, given all of the noise with the news and social media, and during this time when we are not in control due to the lockdown and COVID, it seems like people are trying to take control of conversations. So it seems interesting that that seems to be a breakdown in a relationship that I see, is that control. Where does that fit in the four horsemen, sort of trying controlling the conversation?
That is a great connection, not one that I had like completely thought of. So I appreciate that connection. I think that kind of based at least on anecdotally what I've seen is that really goes into, it could really go into all four, maybe not quite as much stonewalling that we would see unfold, but definitely some criticism and some contempt where there's a lot of polarization of, you know, you believe this or you believe this, and there's not a lot of wiggle room. And certainly it is very easy to become defensive if someone is attacked, like you feel attacked, certainly online, which is where a lot of us are like living socially. So if someone is suggesting, oh, that I can't believe you think that, or, you know, this concern is not valid, I think a lot of people immediately jump to that defensiveness.
I think the stonewalling is called unfriending.
That's a good point. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I have a comment.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, hi.
Hi.
Yeah, one of my fear is that sometimes I try to communicate with my fans and my friends on Facebook as a public person, and it's so. I took a picture of your slide, and I really like the area that says, "Be aware of cognitive distortions." So sometimes you post something to inform or to educate yourself, and some people will have this really negative comment without even understanding what's going on, why you posted this, and they'll have this really negative comment. So now every time I want to post something, I'm afraid to post something because I'm afraid of hurting somebody's feelings, but I don't mean to hurt anybody's feeling. And despite all these things that are going on, I'm not trying to take one side over the other. So I'm trying to be in the middle by understanding that we are all in this and everybody's a victim and we're not. So we should really try to educate ourselves instead of just coming to a very fast conclusion. And that kind of bothers me a little bit. So I'm trying to find a way of, like, other ways to communicate with fans and to, on my own Facebook, without being attacked or being stereotyped or being, attacked, basically. It's like, it's very annoying.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. One of the thoughts that I was having, and let me know what you think about this, is it sounds like maybe some people that are jumping to conclusions or assumptions that might be like their internal dialogue that has nothing to do with what you're actually posting, which I want to like validate. That's even more frustrating because then it feels like there's not that sense of control of, well, if I knew what was setting people off, I could avoid that. But just hearing how deliberate you are in, the content and the delivery, I'm wondering how much of this is people's internal life, like just presenting itself on your social media. And so with that, if you felt like that was a possibility, I think one of the things
which actually allowed me to know a lot of people that were my friends that I didn't know why they were my friends in the first place. By seeing the comments, I was like, wow, this person was actually my follower. I was like, oh my God. So it allowed me to discover and to know and to be aware.
Sure. Which, I mean, I can also see could potentially make, like, you know, your fans and your friends that much more in your corner to like see how like you are staying consistent and like really voicing like neutrality if that's what you're really connecting with. And so I wonder if like potentially one thing that could be helpful to you is really relying on like that like internal self-confidence of, I know my intentions, I am presenting this in a very professional way, like this is my business, I am taking this very seriously, it wasn't an impulsive decision to post this, and if people are having a reaction, I can offer an explanation, but if they aren't willing or able to hear it in that moment, that's probably much more a reflection of like where they are in that space. Is that, hopefully that's helpful.
Totally, yeah.
I'd love to hear if anyone else is also on social media or spending a lot of time on social media. I see Cody there, and I actually follow Cody. I don't know if you're on.
I'm here.
You're on social media, but you're always sharing good vibes. And I think that that's a kind of a nice thing. I wrote down this quote. I don't know who said it, but one kind word can change someone's entire day. And I think that could someone like maybe apply to Felly too, is maybe we just share kind words. But I know with Cody, he shares a lot of daily vibes. So what's your experience been?
Yeah, hi everyone, Cody Barbo, San Diego, California. I'll tell more about myself later. But in regards to social media, so since the pandemic unfolded, I had a baby. I have a cute dog. He's back there. That's Scooter. And I have grandparents and family members that can't see their granddaughter as often as they'd like to. So I started getting into this habit of posting a daily dose of good vibes. I just post usually 4 photos a day on Twitter or a couple more on Facebook of my family, my dog, my baby, and anything else that I'm doing, which isn't much because mostly on home lockdown, but just a nice spread of positivity during the times that we're in. Kind of breaks free from the noise of politics, social justice issues. I mean, it's a really tense time for everyone right now because we're not interacting in person as often. So everybody's got their guards up when it comes to their posts digitally. And as much as I'm passionate and care and want to share my feelings and thoughts about social justice and politics, I choose to not to. I keep that to myself and for my family to discuss. So I opt in for the positive, which is cute pics of my dog and kid, and it kind of spreads a little positivity in this world during these dark times.
That sounds like I want to follow you. That sounds like a great feed of like babies and dogs. I really appreciate too how you have taken maybe like stock of like what works for you. Like certainly I understand like there are people who like sharing some of like their political thoughts is like a great form of like advocacy and catharsis, but I really appreciate how you're pointing out that isn't the case for everyone. And it doesn't mean that because you're not posting that there isn't like thoughtfulness or an opinion behind it. But it really talks about how if we are true to like what we feel is most effective for us, it really supports our mental health. And you are probably not sleeping that much right now. So like hats off to you even more for being so like wise-minded in that, because that's absolutely a great example of that wise mind.
Not to get off the topic of the social media, because I'm sure a lot of people are dealing with different, I'm sure a lot of people have a lot of thoughts about that. But back to Cody, I know that you also have your startup, Trust and Will. And Cody was actually a winner of one of our startup competitions back in 2016. So very successful entrepreneur. How are you dealing during this time with, pretty much venture capital, I guess some people are doing well, some, some startups aren't doing so well, given that everybody's holding on to their capital. What's been your experience during this lockdown?
Yeah, so the high level of Trustimul, you can think of us like the TurboTax for setting up your estate plan online. Over the last 2.5 years, we've raised over $8 million, helped 120,000 families across the country in building a best-in-class estate planning offering that you can get from start to finish in as little as 30 minutes. And we've done it with best-in-class technology, high-touch customer support experience, and a product that is just as good as what an attorney can provide, especially for the everyday family. So we don't necessarily cater to like the high net worth or ultra high net worth or families with really complex situations. But if you use TurboTax, you go through Trustimul, it's going to feel very much the same. And our business took off during the pandemic. I mean, we saw user growth, site traffic double within 3-4 weeks as mid-March kind of unfolded and the country went into full shutdown mode. And as the crisis unfolded, we saw this growth, but for us as a team, it was business as usual. We have almost 20 people on our team. Marketing was the same. We pulled back we always take like a tongue-in-cheek approach because estate planning is not the most fun topic to discuss, but we pulled back some of their ads, took a little more conservative tone, but our product remained the same, our prices remained the same, and our customer support, live chat, phone support, all remained the same. And it accelerated a lot of press opportunities for a variety of lenses, whether it was just what is an estate plan. Education is still the biggest barrier. Whether it was for people on the front lines, what are they supposed to do? They're putting themselves and their families at risk. So we launched a healthcare initiative, which over 11,000 healthcare professionals across the country got a free estate plan from us. That's a promotion that's still running today. As a thank you, my wife works in the hospital, so it's kind of hit close to home. And then on top of that, we had to completely reassess our culture and our company experience as we went from an entirely in-office team to a virtual team. And we're kind of pre-wired as a startup to go virtual, but missing out on the snacks, the air conditioning for some people, the mentorship, those natural kind of connections that happen, the sparks of ideas and innovation in an in-person setting. We've had to adjust in a virtual. So snack boxes, monthly surprise DoorDash or Grubhub gift cards, celebrating people's birthdays or work anniversaries in a virtual setting, bringing in guest speakers like Steve Case, who's one of our investors, the co-founder of AOL. And we have a couple other big names that are friends of the team that'll be coming in, always with a surprise element, so keep people on their edge and engaged. But we've had to do a lot of the same things that we were doing before, just virtually. And it falls back to the leadership team to keep people engaged and to make them feel supported personally and professionally, because it's really become one and the same. I've always cared deeply about my team, but even more so now as people are still going through life. They're buying homes, they're having kids, they're getting married. And for them to feel just as supported personally as they are professionally, as they used to be, in my opinion, two different things, are now very much one. And we try and be mindful of connecting them, with mentors, with greater opportunities within the organization. And we're not perfect, but we look at other companies that prioritize their team and culture prior to the pandemic virtually and how we can adapt and be better than we are today. Oh, Janice, you're on mute. Hi.
Hi, Cody. I like your story. I do executive coaching, so I talk to business leaders like you, and one of the things that I've noticed during the course of the pandemic is that in the initial stages that we've gone through, it was like our adrenaline was running, and everybody was trying to be super heroic and really working hard at helping each other make the adaptation to this new environment. And now I sort of feel like we're over the initial crisis, and now we've sort of fallen more into this malaise that I feel like my clients they're struggling with it, because they feel like that they were sustaining some energy with their teams, and now they just feel like everybody is fatigued. And plus, a lot of the people that are working at home who have kids and everything used to be better performers at work, and now they're slipping, so to speak, because they are dealing with too many things at home, and their home environment is not an ideal situation for their focus and concentration. So So I have clients who are asking me, like, how do I continue to set appropriate expectations, which is something that Alyssa was referring to on her charts. Don't we have to modify our expectations so that we don't think these people can deliver the same level of quality and productivity and all that? So I just see that leaders are a little bit struggling with how do I adjust my expectations, or how do I sustain them? And how do we keep our energy high as a team? I like some of the things that you were mentioning on what you're doing, but I'm interested in hearing any feedback from Cody, Alyssa, Bambi, or anybody else on just trying to keep energy flowing right and setting expectations.
Yeah. I apologize. There's a car that pulled up in front of my house that's bumping music, and I'm going to go out there and yell at them as soon as I'm done with this. So I hopefully don't hear it. But yeah, some of those stuff. So we're basically prepared. Of course, perfect timing as I'm having to talk is it's good music too, but not during this. The next 6 months, we are for sure remote. The next 6 months, or the first 6 months of 2021, we're probably likely to be remote. We're very fortunate that our rent is cheap and we don't have to necessarily opt out of the lease, because we have team members have permission to go in there. We have a temperature scanner. We have hand sanitizers at every desk. We have taken the precautions that a startup can at this stage. But our intention is to be virtual because our team safety is number one. So some of the things that may apply to the group, we provided a free year of meditation app subscription to the whole team. We are looking at a work from home stipend. So I'm lucky because I have an office here, but some of our team members were in studios or one bedrooms, or they're younger, so they have roommates. Or even with kids. I'm a father, but we have a couple team members who have toddlers at home. It's a little more noisy than a 6-month-old. And having an optimal space to get your work done, even we're very family first at Trustable, but even to have a closed door, to have that, kind of peak productivity hour. And I work with the CEO coach and we talk about this, where we give the stipend to get people and have their setup dialed in. They can take anything from the current office home, monitors, accessories, their standing desk if they want to carry it out. But then even looking at ongoing mentorship, we have everybody on the team connected with 2 mentors right now, somebody who's a few years ahead of them. Our fear is that we don't ever want to lose anybody from our team to go and chase a new opportunity in an outside organization. So can we connect with someone that can give them that path internally to grow within our company? And being venture backed, there's perks that we can provide that some businesses don't have, but looking at a longer term work from home environment, what are some additional opportunities that we can pursue? One of the things we've talked about is an on-site versus being in the mindset of doing an off-site once a year. Do we do an on-site that's socially distanced where we can get together as a group with everybody's families, food, fun, but in a safe way? It would be totally opt-in. And then even looking at some additional benefits, is there childcare support we can provide to the parents on our team? Is there accessories beyond just like a nicer monitor or a desk at home that we can provide to our team that makes them more productive and supportive? We did a survey, an anonymous survey with the team, and I'll end it at this point. 93% of the team said they are more productive at home, and I put myself in this bucket, and I have a feeling the one who said that they're not is the one with the 3-year-old. But I think there's also the growing parents that will join our organization as we probably double our headcount over the next 6 months. We need to look at alternative benefits to target and benefit parents, not just everyone else on the team. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you.
That is a very creative, holistic approach. Like, that's really admirable. I am really excited too to hear how much parents are being considered right now, because in the past it was very much discouraged. Even in so I'm a clinical social worker, which is a predominantly female field, and I would still be encouraged, don't say, if they say, do you love kids? Don't ever say you want them, because there could be this sense of you might leave. So I love the fact that now it's really supporting people as whole, human beings instead of workers, which you may have done that decades ago too, if you had been around, but it's exciting that that's in more of the general conversation. So awesome. What about other people? Are you feeling it's difficult to be working from home and not on site? I love that idea of an annual on site versus off site, but are other people struggling or not feeling maybe as supported? Oh, you're muted. Sorry.
Yeah. So this year, I finished my new album, which was supposed to be released in the spring, in February. But so I went on tour in Africa. So I came back in March, and with the lockdown and everything, I had to postpone the release of the album. And all the other work that I was doing with the Academy has been also postponed. So right now I am at home, stuck with my husband. I have to cook and do everything. And he was like, oh my God, finally, now I have you more than 2 weeks at home. You're always gone. I'm like, you should say thank you to COVID-19. So anyway, so it's a little bit frustrating, but I am also using this time to get inspired to write more songs and to do my fashion design and to do some artwork. So it's been an inspirational moment, but at the same time, I miss the stage and the traveling and stuff like that. And I'm a parent, so I have to, deal with my kid and all sort of things. So yeah, so I'm trying to find ways to balance that and where I can find some resources. And that's why I'm very pleased to be part of this discussion and with Bambi. Thank you, Bambi, for inviting me. So anywhere I can get some emotional support, and especially in the business world, because I am an independent artist and I don't have a coach, I don't have a counselor. So I'm kind of, I don't know where to put my head. I don't know what to do, basically. Yeah.
It sounds like, I mean, certainly everyone's life has been shifted, but I mean, very much like what you're describing with your career, I can appreciate is not something that easily goes to a work from home. Like I teach in the Masters of Social Work program at Fordham University. And so mid-semester, we just went to Zoom, we worked it out. It was okay. Definitely some like bumps along the way. But for you, I mean, there's certainly you could perform online, but I get like that's not the same as like being on stage. And certainly if it has pushed back something as major as an album release, which congratulations on finishing it. That's a major accomplishment. But I can really appreciate how there is definitely probably like, well, there potentially might be this loss of like the everyday identity of like who you are as like a career woman and that kind of thing. So I love that you're acknowledging that and validating that loss while also looking at, okay, so I'm reconnecting in like different ways in the home and really looking for that mastery of like, what am I good at? And like, what brings me like validation and purpose, even if it's not my normal like go-tos. I think that's excellent, but still hard.
Yeah, and it improved my relationship with my husband too, where for the first time he actually told me what a good cook I was. He never told me, because I've been cooking a lot, and my daughter and I, everything is going well. We've had enough time to spend together, and I'm embracing that to make it work. So
that's awesome. That's great.
I touch on something that all three of them who shared. So I'll touch on something that relates to all three. So when the pandemic struck and we were locking down, I wrote this piece titled "In Ordinary Times We Suffer Alone." And so that helped me put a lot of my losses into perspective. And so what I came away with after writing that essay was that this pandemic has taken away what I want, but given us what we need. And so that time was basically at 5 o'clock, and some of you already know the story, at 5 o'clock, I'd basically become extremely domesticated. And I'd cook dinner and all my boys would have to be home. This is the first time in a long time that we were all in the same house together, because we weren't shuffling them to stuff. I wasn't going to meetings. And so we had dinner at 6:30. So that meant 5 o'clock I was cooking. And we pretty much did that for quite a bit. And I had put them to work. I had somebody setting the table, washing dishes, putting stuff away. It was a really nice routine. And I really looked forward to it. And it was a great way for us to get back into the routine and just be with one another. We really enjoyed it. Now with the opening up, they're back out and doing all sorts of things. So we don't have that, but I was able to create that new routine and find those new relationships like Felly with her husband and daughter. And Cody, I was also full of a lot of energy, and I just, had tons of energy to think of these things that my sons were doing. We got rid of the gardeners. I put my sons to work out in the garden and, out in the lawn, out and doing stuff, right? And then sort of like Janice was talking about, you hit this kind of malaise. You feel like, oh, it's Groundhog Day again. We're doing the same thing over again, and it's over and over and over. And you kind of want a new routine. I've put these routines in place, and now I'm exhausted. I've discovered new things, and I'm working on a book. I'm writing a book. This downturn has really helped me write a book. So I'm trying to keep it up, but at the same time, I'm losing a lot of energy as well, and I get really tired. So sort of what Janice was saying is like, how do I keep this going? How do I keep up the energy? Oh, there's Dawn. You could unmute yourself, Dawn.
All right, happy to do so, thanks. So this is an energy booster for everybody. In case you guys haven't heard of it, it's called Monster Beverage. It really is a fantastic energy drink, and if you're interested in stocks, that's a great one too. All right, I'll throw that out there. That's what we do over here. So I have, thank you for sharing, everybody. Great stuff. Cody and Janice, when you guys talk about companies and what people are doing, something that happened yesterday, which kind of just happened, when you spend time with people and you see and hear their fears and their concerns, and you hear things like, wow, this is really making me think about life, like changing it. Like I'm gonna sell my multi-million-dollar business. I'm gonna go buy acreage over here. I'm gonna live off the land. I've already got food safe for 75 families for 6 months, things like that. And you think, wow, there's some definite feelings going on in this world, regardless of how wealthy you are or how poor you are. And so yesterday I decided to go get myself tested for COVID. Now, I don't know if you guys have ever done that, but it was my first experience. I had heard a lot of different stories, and I thought, well, how about I experience it myself and create an opinion on it? And so I was tested for the antibodies, which they give you a response in 10 minutes, which was really great. And thank God, no COVID in my past, don't have it. But then they also did the nasal swab, which I had heard was very painful and what to do. And frankly, for me, felt like a tickle. So that whole thought that, oh my gosh, I'm going to suffer today, it was nothing more than a tickle. I thought, wow, maybe people who've experienced it have obviously different nasal passages, sure. But there are people who haven't experienced it who might also be thinking of this and may be afraid to go get tested for one reason or another. Those results come back in a week, but I'm not too concerned. The reason I'm sharing this is it gave me a chance to try to put myself in someone else's shoes, to experience things, to address some of those fears maybe that they are feeling. And then to, now I went home and I shared it with the people that I typically have spent the last 5 and 6 months with, my immediate family, my parents, my siblings, and my coworkers. And somebody went yesterday right after me and said, oh, I'm gonna go get tested as well. And not my family, a coworker. And so now we have some baselines for our families and here in the workspace. So I guess my question that I'm kind of long-winded going to is, are companies doing these types of things to say, wow, maybe 5 of us have had the antibodies. Wow, this group, great. Go back to work. You're not getting it anymore. Go back to a normal life for you guys. Just a thought.
I think that was to Cody or Janet.
Yeah. We've had members of our team get tested, and I'll speak very briefly on it. My brother had COVID, and it completely wrecked him for five weeks, and he's 26 and as healthy as could be. And I'm asthma, so I'm high risk. So that, on top of being a father, on top of my wife working in the hospital, I have no interest to go back to the office for any time soon. But for our team, we at least put the necessary, we put it out there like, hey, if you want to work in the office, you have our permission. Do the temperature scan when you come in. If you're showing symptoms, obviously don't come. And it's been very few people, like maybe one or two at most. And we have a pretty spacious office, so I'm not concerned with them interacting. We have a professional cleaning crew coming in every month. And I'm sure there's more we could do than that, but we've given them permission to use best judgment when it comes to this. But until a large tech company is sending their teams back in full, or until a vaccine comes out, there's no need for us to be back in the office. We have so many folks on the team that are spouses, parents. It's just not worth the risk, even them testing positive and getting through it after a couple weeks.
Yeah, and I'll chime in. The companies that where I'm coaching Don are kind of cover the gamut. Some of them have production facilities where that are still in operation and have operated essentially almost uninterrupted during the entire period of time, but they just stepped in to create more physical distancing, put up plexiglass barriers between employees and things like that. In other cases, headquarters have completely shut down, but now they're reopening with only those employees that want to come into the office, because they're pretty much letting employees make that call and stay virtual if they, have somebody at risk in their home. So what I'm seeing now is headquarters operations who are functioning partly in office and partly virtually. And then I have one client, Core Power Yoga, that has shut down almost every studio in the country. So I mean, it's completely covers the gamut. So yeah, I think everybody is just trying to do the opening as carefully as they can and to allow for as much individual decision making as possible so that people can assess their own risk levels.
From my standpoint, so I got tested for antibodies. I actually think I had COVID maybe in January, when I was sick for about 3 weeks, and I guess the antibodies wear off. So I was tested just last month, July, and it was negative, but I'm not sure if those are very accurate. And then my sons have been tested. I've had them tested 3 times already, and it's been negative. But along those lines, I think what I've been doing to try to stay healthy is I am, I call it my time to make the donuts moment, when I try to just walk, run, do the elliptical, do something, but you have to stay healthy, right? So that's been something I'm extremely cognizant about now. As I get older, it was a lot easier to work out when I was younger, because it's just, you're younger and have more energy. Now it's just sort of, especially when you have kids and all that, you really have to make time for that. So I know that's somewhat of a tangent, but it's, when we're thinking about COVID, that's the thing that I think about a lot, is how am I staying healthy? So, so it doesn't affect me.
One thing that I'm hearing that I'm really excited about, like on a relationship level too, is, so when Don was talking about like sharing his experience with the testing, like really normalizing that, this was my experience, like everyone's not going to have the same one, but let me talk to you about like what this was like for me. It really starts to open that dialogue. Maybe if somebody did have like a negative experience, or also like, it was more of a tickle for me too, and I just didn't know what was going on there. I didn't know if that was just me, and now we can talk about that. And I hear that too with like how Cody in his company, how he has really like opened up some talks about what is it like to work from home with roommates? What does it feel like to work at home with a toddler? And those are like conversations that we wouldn't necessarily think about in business, of like talking about healthcare testing or talking about like work from home situations, because normally we want to, you know, present that like everything's good, everything's fine. And it sounds like the more that we can really share what's going on and still like use that as a connection versus it being seen as a distraction, it sounds like that's really benefiting a lot of different people. So that's awesome.
I see Lindsay, who is driving, but she's, it's nice to see somebody driving, and it would be great to hear from Lindsay if you can share.
Hi guys.
Hi, you're the only one.
Thanks for having me on. Yes, my connection's not very good, so I apologize in advance. But I'm really enjoying hearing the different experiences that everyone's going through and the different types of situations that, you know, kind of like, I don't remember your name, the therapist, the BetterHelp woman just said, about how different folks are kind of handling this and how they're structuring their businesses and their life. And speaking personally, when I'm on video calls with people from around the world and connect about kind of what they're going through, like I was on the phone with someone in Colorado, that's from Colorado yesterday, and I said, "What's happening with your world? How's life? How's your kids?" And he said his youngest daughter sits on the front porch and reads through the yearbook, like she's just struggling. And then to hear those kind of stories from him, you know, helps me relate to him as a person, helps us stay connected. I think just, you know, creating that kind of relationship, and to know like real life, this is hard. I don't know if y'all can still hear me, but you know, this whole situation is just hard. It's hard on kids, especially the ones that are too young to understand what's going on, why they can't be with their friends, why their parents are stressed out. And I think someone else had mentioned the political environment and the impact that has on all of us. So it's nice to connect and to hear other people's stories. And it's also, you know, it's good to be part of this community.
Yeah, I like the positive stories. I like the stories too when people, you know, when people share their challenges and struggles, because quite frankly, that's, you know, I'm going through some of those too. Not to bring those up, but I do like hearing the positive stories, like you said, when you heard about your friend and his daughter is sitting there looking at the yearbook too. Because I have teenage boys, and I know this is not the parenting thing, but they're pretty much struggling trying to stay social, right? I mean, you got to keep those guys busy or they will get in trouble. I mean, just like adults. But it's definitely been a struggle for them, not being able to work, not being able to go out and, you know, because I have teenagers, so they do work. I had one worked at a t-shirt shop, another worked as a, you know, as a busboy. This was last year, and it's good for them, and they're missing out on that. So so my challenge is, how do I keep them purposeful? And how do I keep myself purposeful? So, so this has been really good hearing everyone's stories, because it, you know, like even Cody was, I mean, my goodness, that guy is chock full of ideas with the on-sites, or was it off-sites? On-sites, yeah, that's a pretty novel idea. But I guess we do those retreats, right? Those are, people have done those retreats. But I definitely feel like this longing for more than just, you know, this is great. I get to see everyone. Dawn is over on the East Coast, and, you know, Janice, I haven't seen her in years. So this is really nice to make that connection. At the same time, I just feel like there's this intimacy, I think, like seeing Lindsay in her car, seeing the bookshelf behind Janice, and seeing Felly in her home. But there's, I don't know, there's also a lack of intimacy that I'm missing. Or maybe I'm just getting tired of these Zoom calls and I just really want to be together with everybody. Get you.
Yeah, I agree, Bambi. I think that I left the post office while I was on the call with you, and not being able to, you smile at someone and make real, like, genuine eye contact with, not through, the plastic stuff. I miss that. Like, I'm a feeling kind of person. I like to feel with other people. And when you look at what the scientists say about emotional contagion and how important that is for us with the mirror neurons and how we genuinely connect to people is by smiles and by our body language. So this is kind of messing up my whole system, not being able to go around and talk and engage in a real life conversation with people. That, besides just my family, I talk to them too much.
Well, even when you walk around with your mask, on, I was at the store and some guy said, "Yeah, I'm smiling at you," or he was smiling at the cashier, and he was making a joke. But you don't even, sometimes I smile and I'm like, oh, maybe I'm supposed to wave now because people don't know that I'm actually smiling at them, right? When you're walking or taking your walks, and but I'm really smiling, and they have no idea. And now we just have to this whole new habit of engaging is also very, very strange. Strange having to deal with that. So.
On the flip side, I'll just share this real quick. My sister and I were talking on the phone. She's in Florida. And she said, well, now's the perfect time to get plastic surgery. If you want a facelift, you can wear a mask, you can wear a hood, no one would even know. You can still go out in public 24/7. I'm like, oh man, that's really it.
It's a good time to do, a lot of that stuff. Exactly. Facelift on your house too, right? Because
that's right.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true.
I'm gonna mute so that I don't wreck, but I'm enjoying listening to you guys. Thanks for letting me share.
Right. Janice said.
Yeah, that conversation, Bambi, about your grocery store experience is the opposite of what happened to me yesterday. I had two guys in front of me who were wearing their masks down on their chin, and where I live, there's a mask ordinance, and so I feel frustrated sometimes, and I'm actually having to control being angry when I would never ever have been angry at the grocery store before for any reason. I would have just been mellow at the grocery store, but now I have to kind of try to calm myself because now I got to go up by the cashier where those two guys in front of me were just breathing unabated, and it's just, I feel like this is selfish. So I am really having to deal with way more of my emotional mind than I normally do because I'm a very rational thinker. And so I appreciated Alyssa's Venn diagram because I feel way pushed over to the left side of the Venn diagram. And I also think that business leaders are feeling that way too, very pushed over into that emotional mind, and a lot of fear, anxiety, upset that is getting in the way of the rational mind focusing. And so trying to find that balance, I think, to the wise mind is challenging. And I love your terminology, Alyssa. I think it's good. It's one way to ask business leaders. I ask them, sometimes I say, when someone's trying to be real smart and rational, I say, you sound like you want to be right on this. Can you be wise? Wise is different than smart. So that tends to click with people because they'll say, oh, I get it. I think I'm just being smart and not wise in this circumstance. And it sort of helps them pull on their emotional intelligence to deal with the problems at work. But that's not what I wanted to address. I wanted to go back and address the purposefulness that Bambi's talking about. And I think a lot of people on this call are saying that they're either using their creativity or their time to learn or their time to get closer to people in connection during this COVID crisis. And I think those are all beautiful ways of developing ourselves and going to that better society or better place that Bambi is challenging us over. One of the things I'm doing myself is, I'm going to say this, getting around to trying to get myself more educated about white privilege and So like I'm hosting a learning session for a group of people in my congregation to just go through Ibram Kendi's video and Robin DiAngelo's video and talk about what we learned from that. And I feel like we're kind of in a moment where people are more ready and they have some time to think about these things and maybe learn how we can build a better world. And so the more I can think about other people and not myself, the happier I am right now. And also the more I can stay connected to my purpose. And so I think that, plus I'm doing political canvassing. So I think those things, phone banking for my candidates, those are things that take me out of my own feeling sorry for myself, and they're helping me stay with purpose. Just sharing on that and recommending it.
I love that it's keeping you social too. Like, absolutely, the purposefulness is critical, but I love that it's also keeping you connected with people in your congregation, people in your political party, and then also connecting with strangers, phone banking. Like those cold calls can be really hard work, but that's great, especially at a time when I think, particularly with the political unrest, it could be very easy to kind of withdraw into yourself, of just feeling very overwhelmed with potentially everything you don't know but want to know, but instead like finding that action is really wonderful.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on what Janice said in terms of thinking about other people. So I had a what would you call it? I guess a confrontation with someone. We were at the beach and my husband was playing football, a little Nerf football. So it wasn't a huge football, Nerf football with my youngest son. And my youngest son ended up throwing it at my husband and kind of missing and hitting someone. It was a huge dude with a son. So we thought, okay, well, he's going to be okay because he's got a son too. And he ended up, we thought he was going to throw it back. He took the football and threw it out in the water. And we were like, did he just, and my youngest son was thinking, wait, did he just throw that football? And of course, my husband, like, hey, man, why'd you throw the football? And he didn't want to get into an argument with him. And neither did I. And so we just de-escalated and we just said, look, you know what? He might have lost his job. He might be pulling his hair out because of his kids. And so we just wanted to give him that space, and we wanted to put ourselves in his shoes and just say, you know what, it's okay. I don't know what you're going through, but it's okay. We don't have to pile on. And so we went out and got the football and we stopped playing. But that was definitely a moment where we just said, look, we don't know what people are going through, but we are far more blessed. And so we can at least try to empathize with everyone because we don't really know their story.
Something you both shared, which is pretty cool. We're talking about relationships today, and I don't know if we're all finding this, but my relationship circle has now expanded to every single human being I come in contact with. There is a relationship now that we didn't have before. And to your point, you know, you're sitting there online and you have these guys without their masks on, and we all have freedoms. And some people are thinking they're being wise and maybe they're not, or this person, whatever's going on at the beach with them. But I'm reading this incredible book, and one of the stories in here, I won't get into the story, but I'll just give the line. It says, corporate unity requires personal sacrifice. And I thought, so corporate unity, for me, that means the world that I live in, everybody that I come in contact with. And to be able to do that, I have to have, you know, my purpose on, and my purpose comes, some of you know, from the scriptures. And there's a scripture in Romans 12 that talks about, if at all possible, as far as it depends on me, live in peace with everybody. And I think that's some of the things that if we can all do that, You don't have to agree with them. I don't have to agree with those clowns not wearing their masks in a public place. I don't have to agree with the guy who was threw a football into the to the beat the water. But as long as it depends on me, if that's how I choose to live and want to make this a better place, to your point, Janice, we do have to sacrifice ourselves. And I think when we do that, we get a blessing in a way that, we're not sure where it comes from. So I just want to say to both of you ladies, great job and great examples, because we need more of that in this world.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg has a great piece of advice for relationships. She said that she has to be deaf, or it's good to be deaf sometimes. So basically you don't have to hear what your husband says. So I often use that in my marriage. Just like, I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said. But sometimes it's good. And I just walk away. This COVID time has actually taught me to have more of that patience, because I think we are pressured more now. Also, we're so, we have nothing else to do, right? So we're internalizing all of these thoughts with the people we have relationships with. And so it's a lot easier to get angry, as Janice said. And so I find myself in those situations where it could be confrontational. So I have to turn it off. So almost like Felly said in social media, I just, it's maybe you turn it off, or you just kind of send a daily dose of good vibes like Cody, and ignore what people are saying. If you don't have anything good to add, right? I think that's sort of what Dawn is saying too.
I was just processing what Janice had previously said about the two circles, the wise versus emotional, and how we're starting to lean more emotional, or this world is kind of forcing it. And so I've historically worked at these big corporations. So unlike most of this group of entrepreneurs, which I really admire, I've been in these big companies, and like a Microsoft, for example, and they're very sterile environments. I mean, they've grown so big, and everything is very sterile and genderless. And I mean, there's a lot of good things that comes with that, because I feel like I have so many opportunities as a woman, but there's not emotion, all that to say. And so I like to call myself a COVID pioneer, because at least in Austin, there was nobody that was diagnosed when I got sick. And this is the first week in March. And so it was very unsettling. And it was unsettling with my colleagues too, because we didn't know what I had. I tested negative at first. And it was interesting because this office environment, or this work environment that was purely professional, suddenly we learned so much about each other personally. People were sharing, yeah, I'm worried about my parents, they live with me. I'm worried about my child, she has asthma. And I didn't even know this about my colleagues. And so it was interesting and bonding in many ways. It was also challenging because I didn't realize that an illness could become political. And somehow, even without people sharing their political leanings, you sort of sensed it, based on their comments. And I just thought, well, no, I'm really sick. Like I'm not imagining it, or I don't think I'm dying. The other extreme. There's just a lot of political sort of influence in how people interacted with it, and that's not typically in the workplace. So I think leaders are going to be challenged in how they manage how their employees interact in this area. And and if you think about the racial injustice, it's almost impossible for that topic not to come up at work, and it's good for conversations to be had. And so I don't necessarily have the answers, but I can say I saw the extreme good and I saw the extreme bad come out, because it was something that's just been buried under the carpet in corporations, where you don't really show your personal side, but it's forced out now. So I think this will be a challenge in companies, how to maintain cohesion and good team collaboration, knowing that this is coming out.
I'm just thinking about what you said about having to manage that, and that being like such a different scope of, there's probably not been very many, if anything, that like time-wise, that has so many different topics risen to the top that people just feel so passionate about. And I just also want to like remark, it sounds really invalidating if people are telling you, someone who has survived COVID, that potentially it is a hoax. And so I just really like, one, I want to express like, I'm so sorry that you had that experience, both the disease and then that, but to be able to kind of get in that wise mind of, okay, like if this is what people are thinking, how can we work with it? Again, like I'm just very impressed with how well everyone is just synthesizing this experience and this information, because it is absolutely living in crisis every day. And it's the fatigue that we're feeling is absolutely valid with how much like cortisol and how much adrenaline our brains are just pumping, that our bodies just aren't meant to take even those stress hormones at that level. So that's amazing that you have that much grace for your fellow coworkers, even who disagree. So that's wonderful.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, and that leaders have to actually not just be business minded now. This isn't just about economics in the workplace. And it reminds me of a friend of mine who wrote this piece, and he also criticized the age of reason, and he called it the age of slumber, because basically people were not grappling with their human condition anymore. And we kind of maybe swept that under the rug. I think Anne-Marie sort of suggested that, and now it's coming out. And we have to face our human condition. And I think leaders are faced with that and having to deal with both trying to think of how to run a company, but also how to deal with the human condition. I think it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing that we're all somewhat grappling with that. I don't think we had done so before. Now it takes a pandemic to do that. But we have a few more minutes, and it would be great to end on a high note, maybe a positive note, and sort of like what Cody said, his daily dose of good vibes. Maybe he would have shown his little baby, but maybe everyone can share something, a daily dose of good vibes with the group.
I'll kick it off.
Okay.
So had a lunch meeting here in the office with a young lady, friend of mine from church. She's a professional social worker, line of social workers. I'm on the other side of this coin, capitalism, so very different. She's tall, black, I'm short, white. We go to the same church. We have views that are total polar opposites. When we got together, we've served on boards together, we're friends. But I asked her to share with me her story, a little bit more of her background that I had not heard before. You don't hear that typically in a boardroom. And it was great to hear, and I learned so much from her. And it was so cool. After an hour and a half, we walked out of my office hugging. Yes, we hugged, sorry. She was comfortable with it. I was comfortable with it. I think that's where the consideration for one another is. And I just gotta say, give people a chance that you don't think might not look like you or feel like you or think like you or be in the same boat with you. And I think it was you, Lindsay, who said, you don't have to agree to love one another. So that's my good news for the day.
Did he hand it off to you, Lindsay? No.
If you want to, the good news for the day. I was able to pick up my daughter, take her to lunch, and spend some time. She got to listen to the first half of this call with me. Yes, which was great. She didn't get to hear me talk bad about her afterwards, but I do. I think it's really, with all the negative that's happening in the world, to be able to focus and change the story to focus on the positive and look at what's important, like you said. Just evaluate, hear each other, pay attention to what really matters, and respect each other, even if we don't agree. I like it. But honestly, thank you guys for doing this. I think it's important. Let me back up for just a second. Mental health, that's what I want to talk about for the ending notes. If we aren't diligent about taking care of our mindset, and like you talked about, being grateful, spending that time and making sure that you deliberately put your attention on what you're grateful for on a regular basis is a huge blessing for me. My family and I will sit together and do that. I think it was a TED Talk, so it's not an original idea. But to sit at lunch and be appreciative, to be able to acknowledge what's important in life and all the positive things that are really happening. Because the chaos, and I think that Better Health, sorry, I stink at names. But if we spend our time just completely, absorbed with that, with all the noise and the chaos, the news, social media, trying to impress people, then we're not ever happy, But if we can take that time, that quiet moment to look inside, connect with what's important with ourselves and with other people, then I think the world can definitely change.
One thing that I have learned, I agree with Lindsay, respecting each other, putting yourself in the other person's shoes, and most importantly, loving yourself, accepting who you are, and then transfer that love back to the other person. I was born and grew up in Africa. I've learned a lot. I've learned and heard a lot of things about white people. For example, I'll give you one example. Like my older sister, she thought that white people was too white, then they look like worms. That was one thing. And then I heard that white people, that they are cold, like they're wet cold, like they're cold. So I had that very, very like curiosity of meeting a white person and to experience whatever they were talking about. So ever since I was a little girl, I was very open-minded and very curious, wanted to explore the world. And, turned out that I'm married to a white person today. And my husband told me the other day, he said, when we met, and I have my natural hair. So he was like, wow. And I said, touch it. So he touched it. And that was the very first time he's ever touched a natural nappy hair of a Black person. He said that turned his perspective around, like it changed him. And so these are really beautiful experience. So for me, hearing things, is good, but experiencing it and understanding where it comes from, the stereotype and the history behind it is very important. So it's very important to educate yourself and to try to be the best person you can be. It's not always going to be in your way. So we have to respect the fact that this world is created diverse, and we're not the only living being or human being in this world. And it's so beautiful and harmonious. God created the world the way it is. So we have to make it a livable place and be grateful for what we have and just respect each other.
Beautiful, Kelly. Chris, you're nodding your head, are you?
Just nodding in agreement. So, yeah, the only thing I keep reminding myself of is something I heard from my pastor years ago, was that, a fireman with a broken leg can't help anybody. So like, I think with regards to like mental preparedness and, us being the best people that we can be, I think we got to look at ourselves first and make sure that we don't have a broken leg, because if we do, then we can't even help other people. Right. So I've personally just been focused more on that, making sure that I'm in the best mental and physical positive state of mind before even trying to help anybody, if that makes sense. So, but that's all I had. That and my nodding of agreement. So.
Janice, did you have any lasting words, or figuring anybody who's on video who might want to share?
Thank you. Thanks, Bambi. First of all, you know, you and I haven't talked to each other, and I haven't gotten to meet these folks only because probably of COVID now. I've had this lovely experience today, which is my big booster of the day. So you were looking for what is the, you know, what is the happy ending? For me, it's really wonderful to connect with all of you and to see how you're doing and learn from you. And I just appreciate the time and the opportunity to have a little reunion with you, Bambi. So thank you for hosting this.
Oh, thank you. Alyssa, do you have any final words before I wrap it up?
No, I love ending with the positive like that. I think that is a great kind of like momentum to like shift us into the next potentially Zoom meeting that we might have. But I really appreciate how much you all shared. I think it makes it so much richer when it's a discussion, and especially because you all have much more of a shared experience than I do. So this was a lot of fun, and I know that might sound a little strange since we talked about some hard things, but I really just appreciate all of your time so much. So thank you.
Thanks, and we'll be doing this again in 2 weeks, Thursday. We'll be doing this actually every other Thursday until, I believe, until November. So, or maybe we'll even go through November. So, and hopefully by that time we will be, the economy will be opened up a bit, but I will share my sort of daily dose of good vibes and just something that, by Lindsay, if you're leaving. For me, and this is somewhat sort of touching on what Feli sort of mentioned, sort of this is God's world. And for me, I've somewhat what Chris has mentioned, working on himself. So I have, you know, before I engage with others, I definitely spend a lot of time. Some people may call it meditating. I call it praying. And a verse I have is Isaiah 43:1, which is, I'm sorry, Isaiah 26:3 is, my brother sent this to me in a text, and it says, "You will keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on you because he trusts in you." And for me, what that means is right now we're transitioning from one house to another, and I have been so anxious, and I've been focused on the house I really want. And it is making me more and more anxious. And so, but when I focus and I transcend, I'm not so anxious anymore. And I think that is, and that's been really great for me, spending that time. Not being so materialistic, and just knowing that that I have, you know, a transcendent God who's watching over me. So, but not everybody has to believe that. Those are my beliefs, and but I'm glad that we're at least all able to share and be together. And thanks again, everyone, because this is really helpful, and I hope you enjoy it too. And I hope to see you guys all next 2 Thursdays from now, August 20th, and maybe we'll have other stories to share as well. And thank you, Janice. It was great to reconnect with you. And I guess that's the good thing about Zoom and this downturn. We're reconnecting with people. So, okay, everybody have a wonderful day, and we are going to have this in video and in a podcast. So if you just want to listen again, we will share it with everyone. Have a good rest of the afternoon.